we are, another Sachem conversation, this time with the legendary Sachem Gymnastics coach, Ken Friedheim. I'm really excited to talk about your sport, your life, and your impact on Sachem.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for all you've done for Sachem in athletics and everywhere else. You've done a great thing for the community.
Well, much appreciated. It's I don't even call it a labor of love because it doesn't feel like work when I'm just talking about a piece of who I am. And that's why we're doing this, so I can make sure other people feel and remember and live in the moment with the people who live the history can talk about their history. So this oral history project is a method of putting conversations on video, which will be transcribed in text form, and working on an audio project as well. It'll be stored at the Sachem Public Library in the Long Island History Room and the libraries at Sachem North and Sachem East. After each year's worth of interviews, I'll document them and put them there on hard drives and so on.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. The conversations have been great. The reception from alumni have been really great, and it keeps picking up steam each week with each conversation. And we've had thousands and thousands of views now, which makes total sense considering there are 50, 60,000 alumni. And each of you as educators, coaches, have impacted the lives of thousands of people. So for you, gymnastics, late 60s, you were here, you predate Fred Vaccaro, you predate, most of the people I've talked to so far. So I'd love to hear your journey. And even before the Sachem talk, where do you come from? Where did you grow up? When was gymnastics initially in your life?
I grew up in Nassau County in town of Hewlett. And my initial introduction to gymnastics was at the beach in the summer. My father was very athletic, and not that he did any flipping around, but he kind of taught me how to do a front somersault, a back somersault. I was constantly upside down on my hands. I really enjoyed tumbling, and Hewlett did not start a team until my senior year in high school. My junior year, they had a club, and in my senior year, we started a team. We were about 6 or 7, maybe 8 kids on the team. We didn't have uniforms. We had no idea what we were doing. We got creamed in every meet we participated in. At that time, gymnastics meets were, judged, but you did not, as it is now, your score, like if you scored a 9-0, that didn't enter into the team score. The team score was like a track meet. If you came in first, you got 6 points for your team. If you came in second, you got 4 points, and so on. In our first competition, where we had no uniforms, I had a T-shirt. I had cut the sleeves off, and I think I wrote Hewlett across the chest. And at that time, strip tumbling was an event. We didn't do floor because we had no floor. We had no room, even if we had something to do it. So strip tumbling consisted of 3 passes: a front pass, a back pass, and a combination pass. So in the first meet, I think, I could be off about this, the only team points we got, I took a first place in strip tumbling, and I took a second place in vault. We only got our board. Back then it was called a Ruther board. We only got a board the night before our first meet. So the first time I had vaulted was the day before our first meet. So my background was minimal. When I went to college, because I was such a fabulous student, I went to a junior college called Morrisville, part of the state university system, and they had no team. When I transferred to Brockport the next year, I kind of smartened up and started to do some studying for the first time in my life. And I went to Brockport, where I did very well academically. They had no social fraternities, but there was an academic fraternity that you had to have a certain cum to be in. It was Phi Epsilon Kappa, and I was in that fraternity because I did get good grades because I was doing something I really wanted to do. But at Brockport, the 3 years that I was there, I had 3 different coaches. The last year, my senior year, was the first year I really got some coaching. He was a graduate assistant that had been a gymnast at West Virginia. And I did learn a lot from him that year. And that was
So yeah, so you know it's not late bloomer, but it in in the case of you weren't playing pee wee gymnastics, but you're picking
no,
this up late in high school. All of a sudden, you develop in college. Did you get a love for it almost immediately? I mean, obviously something happened in high school where you were like, all right, I can do this in college, and then you spent a lifetime in it, so it all stuck.
I loved to tumble. I was always running and doing front flips or standing. I remember one time with a friend when I was in high school, we were waiting for a bus, and I did a backflip at the bus stop. So I enjoyed doing that, and I guess I got my first taste of coaching when I was in college and at Brockport, as most of the phys ed programs at that time, you had to pass every skills course in order to stay in physical education. And there were a lot of guys that were not very skilled in gymnastics, and they asked for my help. So we had stunts and tumbling, we had apparatus 1, apparatus 2. So I used to go into the gym with some of my friends that really were worried about getting thrown out of the program because they couldn't pass the skills courses. So that was my first taste of coaching.
And so what happens after that? You want to go into physical education as a teacher. Was everybody always says nobody knew what Sachem was. Obviously, it was still at that point, late 60s, it had been around for almost 15 years. 1955, obviously, the district was formatted and centralized. But what was the goal? Were you trying to get a job at Hewlett, and how did the Sachem district come up in your life?
My coach my senior year, his name was Danny Deem. As I said, he was from West Virginia. They had contacted him. I don't know if it was Sachem that contacted him or the whatever it was at Brockport that tried to hook people up with jobs. He came to me and said, because he knew I was from Long Island. He said, there's a place on Long Island called Sachem, and they're looking for a gymnastics coach. I said, I never heard of it. So I went to the library, which I didn't do very often back then, and got a map, and I looked for a Sachem. I couldn't find it. And a friend that was a soccer player, I said to him, do you have any idea where this place called Sachem is? He said, it's in Lake Ronkonkoma, and they've got a great soccer program, but everything else stinks. So that's how I found out where it was.
So your interview, you accepted. They were based on what I've been hearing from Sabatel and Fred and Mahoney. I mean, they were interviewing people who they thought could be leaders, but it's just fascinating. All of the individuals like yourself that they hired became not only dedicated in the school community, but builders that helped establish who we are today. And for the last, half century, believe it or not, it sounds like a long time, but it was. It's amazing that Walter Dunham, that Dave Rothenberg had this foresight to, everybody who's anybody in the coaching staff at the time became something special. Did you see that, as a young person just trying to get a job? Did you realize, like, all right, here I am, there's something that we could do, or it just manifested over time?
Well, they were looking for a gymnastics coach because at the time Mike Harwood was coaching gymnastics, and he really didn't want to do it. He was just doing it, I guess, as a favor to Dave, and he had said, I really don't want to do this anymore. So I had applied to Sachem because they were looking for a gymnastics coach, and I had also applied to New York City schools, and I hadn't heard anything from Sachem right away, so I was assuming I was going to get a job in the city. But then I did get the call. I met with Dave Rothenberg, and he took me over to the high school, which was at Samoset at the time, what's now Samoset, to meet Mr. Berger. And I had a great interview with Mr. Berger. He wanted to know if I took the job, if I could teach him how to do a handstand. So I started to get up. I said, I could do it right now, sir. And he said, no, not now. And I went back. I don't know if it was that day or a couple of days later when I got a call from Dave to come in and talk to him. And I went to Wilbur Farm, and that's where his office was. And he sat me down. He said, you know what? He says, I'm going to tell you something. He said, you're the first Jew that I'm hiring. I am Jewish. So is Dave. He said, you're the first Jew that I'm hiring. You better not, I won't use the word. You better not mess up. So right from the start, I felt a lot of pressure.
Wow, that's interesting. I never heard that before.
Yeah. There were two people that I feel were very, very influential in how I became the coach that I became. Number one, mentor as a physical educator was Don Willie, and he was amazing. And even though I was there, I think 2 years before Fred came, Fred changed how I coached, how other people coached. I was going by the seat of my pants to begin with. When I started, gymnastics was a spring sport for the first year. And it was totally different all over the state. Some were in the spring, some were in the winter. And then the following year, it went permanently to the fall. But I would go into practice and I'd go around from event to event and really had no plan written up until Fred came. And I saw that he had every minute of that practice planned out. I said, that seems like a good idea. And from that point on, that's how I plan my practices. And it was a big benefit.
It's amazing. Every single person I've spoken to so far credits Fred. I mean, he is, and everybody obviously has the respect for Don, but when it came to this building and precision and efficiency and just a very straight and narrow approach to getting the team and the program in order, he was really the dean of the coaches. And yeah, you can look at 192 wins in football and all these, consistencies and playoff appearances. What he did for Sachem behind the scenes as a mentor, you can't see in record books, but not for nothing. Every program won. Every program wound up building a program and not just a team. It's amazing.
He taught me, he taught everyone else there that was willing to observe and listen how to build a program. That it didn't just start when you got the kids in high school. It started when they were little kids. So I started a community program. I started a summer camp. I did all the things that he really taught everybody to do. And it worked.
Yeah. And so talk about Sachem and its growth. Gymnastics is a piece of it, but you're also teaching, you're seeing the numbers go up in enrollment, seeing the hallways get crowded, you're seeing more buildings being built around the district. Then we start winning everything, and the quality of the athlete is becoming superior because it's just this dog eat dog, very competitive mentality, no matter if it's on the mat or on the field or on the court. It was pretty special. I mean, by the time you hit late 70s, it was, dominance from there on. Can you describe that feeling of what it was like to be in sort of Sachem University, so to speak?
It was great. I really enjoyed it. My first year, it was on the phys ed staff. It was myself, Don Willie, and Fred Kreutzer. And Fred was having some physical problems that year. So realistically, Don and I took all the classes, and I learned so much from Don about how to deal with kids. We had different styles. He was more their buddy, and I was a little bit more of a disciplinarian. But I learned it wasn't the typical, for example, in a volleyball class where you sit everybody down, you teach them how to serve, you teach them how to set, you teach them. We did those things, but we didn't sit them down very much. It was play, and he would play in a volleyball game with the kids. So would I. And when a teachable moment came, he would stop the game and teach. And I learned that was pretty much at the high school level a better way of doing it because these kids had been drilled on how to set, how to serve, or from elementary school up. And they didn't want to sit. They wanted to play. And Don was about the kids playing and being active. And I learned a great deal from him.
So how about building your program? You talked about the youth development, but then I'm also noticing as I'm flipping through yearbook pages, the size and the physicality of the bodies of these young men get bigger and stronger in just pictures. I mean, it's got to be pound for pound the toughest team of any sport. And that's not taking away from football or wrestling, but just looking at the body type, these are completely like low body fat, very, very strong kids. Where does the calisthenics, the weightlifting, the conditioning come into this? And did you also start to see like, okay, we got something here, we got a formula here and it's working? And even your body as a coach, as a young man, you progressively got more jacked over time. And I had you as a gym teacher in the early 2000s, and we were like, whoa, like sign me up for whatever that guy's eating and drinking, because I want to look like that when I'm his age or whenever.
Yeah, we had even there were some really good wrestlers that came out for gymnastics because it was the season before wrestling, and the strength work that we did at the end of practice obviously helped quite a bit. A quick story. My daughter played tennis for Ward Melville, and I didn't get to see her play tennis very often. So when they played Sachem, I went up to watch the match. She came down with me after practice, after the match was over, and a couple of minutes after that, usually 20 minutes before the end of my practice, I would whistle, and the kids knew that was the start of strength conditioning. And we had developed a great conditioning program at the end of practice. You went from station to station, and they would do pull-ups, they would do sit-ups, they would do handstand push-ups against the wall, and a lot of stuff for a good solid 20 minutes, or maybe more if I was not happy with the way practice went. So my daughter saw what was starting to happen. She said, "What are you guys? What are they doing?" I said, "They're doing strength work." She said, "Oh, at Ward Melville, the coach has them meditate at the end of practice." I said, "Well, as long as they keep meditating over there and we keep doing strength work, we'll be in good shape."
Yeah, but we'll be fine.
We did do a lot of strength work, and I think we were always in better physical condition than the teams we went against.
And you coached from 1969 to 2005. There's so many teams, so many athletes. It's tough to say the best, but you know who the All-Americans were, the state champions, and the people that went on to big college and international careers, the Lamorts of the world, the Chris Lamorts. I mean, he's arguably the best of your crop of people. Do you have moments that stand out? Are there specific teams? Were there specific events that just are kind of etched in your psyche forever?
Well, you mentioned Chris, and Chris was the best. He was an all-around man, but his rings, he was so good on rings. It opened up a lot of things for me because I was associated with him. But he was the best in the world. He was the best in the world while he was still in high school. When he was still in high school, he went to an invitational and beat the person in our country who had been USA champ on rings for 4 years prior to that. And he beat him while he was still in high school. And in 1998, when he won the Goodwill Games, he was ranked number 1 in the world. But as far as an all-around, just physically talented gymnast, Norm Ebmeyer, comes to mind. Unfortunately, he was a little early in my career for me to do him justice. He was so good. Well, unfortunately, in his senior year, he broke his kneecap in a preseason meet, and he wanted to show me he could land the double back on Resolite, and I told him, "You're not doing it today. You're not doing it. It's a preseason meet against Port Jefferson." And the Port Jeff coach, I had gotten him a job at his camp I think it was in Pennsylvania for the summer, and that's where he had worked on double backs. So he wanted to show him. I said, "No, you're not doing it today," but he did. But as far as the overall talent in 6 events, I think he may have been the best that I ever coached, and unfortunately, that he became a junior high coach for me later on in life, and an assistant coach at the high school, and he's being inducted this year into the Sachem Hall of Fame.
Yeah, one of the best. And his son, fast forward all those years later, John, who I graduated with, he was a gymnast for you too, and another great all-around multi-sport athlete.
Yeah, he was probably the most unusual Van Orr recipient. A gymnast, a diver, and a golfer.
Yeah.
And he's currently a head pro at a course in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. A very unique athlete.
Yep.
So you get 324 career wins, the most in New York State history, from that 69 to 05, a lot of years, a lot of wins, 14 county titles, 10 state championships, the Suffolk Sports Hall of Fame career, Sachem Athletic Hall of Fame career. As you're, getting ready to retire, the program goes away. Boys gymnastics goes away in the county. It's a very bizarre piece of history. When we've spoken for 27 minutes about this amazing dynasty-like run, yet nobody may ever touch any of these records, accomplishments again. And it's difficult to talk about, but you have the only sport that no longer exists. And how did it happen? What were the feelings then and now? And kind of dive into that a bit.
Well, you have about 10 more hours. It's
let's boil it to 10 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, it's something that happened, not just in Suffolk County, not just to Sachem, not just to Long Island or New York. It happened throughout the entire country. There were only a handful of colleges left with men's gymnastics. It's a multitude of reasons where I've always said I could write a book, but I'm too lazy. But phys ed programs stopped teaching gymnastics. College programs were lost. I don't want to blame Title IX for that, but it had something to do. I've got 2 daughters that were athletes, so I supported Title IX totally. I still do. But for a great example, UCLA it was either 80 or 80, I forget which Olympics, 4 of the 6 men on the United States Olympic team were from UCLA. The following year, they dropped their program. It's the biggest part of the problem, I think, and to try to say it quickly, most parents don't look upon their son to become a gymnast. They want him to play football. They want him to play baseball. They want him to play basketball. For young girls, back when I was growing up, I know my wife took dance lessons. There weren't wasn't gymnastics for girls back then, but for young girls, gymnastics became big. And when I used to judge like a USA championship, you look at the stands for the men's competition, there was hardly anybody there. You go the next day for the women's competition, it was packed because little girls that were going to gymnastics school were bringing their parents. And I think it just fell out of favor as a men's sport. And I predicted years ago that the United States was going to be in trouble, and we are. We're not as good as we could be. We don't have the George Sanchez's and Tommy Zambrotta, who were multi-sport athletes. They were good at everything. And a guy named Joe DeVico brought them to me when they were in, I think, 6th grade. I said, these guys are at my track practices and they're flipping all over the place. You got to do something with them. And they ended up being number 1 and number 2 in the state in the all-around their senior year. But it lost favor. And I can't really blame any one thing. It didn't get the respect that it should have gotten.
So it was really societal, and Sachem
Right.
and the Long Island and even the New York region was just a microcosm of larger issues across the country. But it's interesting to hear, even the take about parents and pushing in that direction, and this struggle between basically a struggle against other sports. Do you want to play football? Do you want to be a gymnast? And gymnastics is not the first or second or even third thought. And now it's not even really a
Right.
thought for many at all, because other than doing your private clubs and some of these other just, Main Street gym setups, you're not going to play varsity. It's difficult to get into college if colleges don't have it. So yeah, it's been a dying sport, and that's difficult for something that you spent your whole life involved in. But at least your records will be untouched. And as long as I'm around, I've been saying we're not taking or putting those plaques away or throwing them out. We're going to keep putting the best of the best in the Sachem Hall of Fame to keep the sport alive that way. And this conversation is a way for me to keep gymnastics alive and to keep your legacy alive.
And I so much appreciate that. And I lose sleep over the fact that it's gone, but I do think very, very often of what you've done and what you continue to do, and the recognition that I can still get to some of those well, they're not kids anymore, people that have come through the program, because there was a lot of sweat put in for many years. And when those people go back to Sachem and see their plaque up on the wall, that really means something. And I applaud you and I appreciate it.
On your path too, you became an international official. You were officiating the sport at some of the highest levels, at various levels. How did that manifest? And what were some of the premier events that you were able to go to? Are you still doing that? Are you still involved in the sport at all?
No, I stopped judging in, I think it was 2000, when they went to the open scoring system, when they went away from the 10-0. We had a group of officials in Suffolk County that were the very best in the country, led by Harry Berkey, who's in the Suffolk Hall of Fame, Tommy Stevenson, Mike Finity, Jeff Cooden, Herb Meserve. We had a study group, and that it's one of the things that made me a much better coach, because we would study we did like well, like Fred, we broke down film um, to be able to judge at the level we were judging at, and I became known as a great, patting myself on the back a little bit, as a good ring judge because of Chris. Because Chris was so good, he became known, and I became known as his coach. And for 2 Olympic cycles, I was the technical assistant in the country on rings. And I think Chris's strength parts changed the way rings were judged in this country because they were just so good. And I gave a few lectures at the international courses that we took as judges. I was asked to give a lecture on strength moves, and I compared his strength parts to guys that were really were Olympic champions, and showed them what it should look like. And he got me a lot of recognition as a judge. But the art of becoming a judge, studying with those guys, made me so much better as a coach because I understood how to put together a routine, how to get the most out of each of my gymnasts.
And between the legendary coaching career, the officiating at the highest level, coaching some of the best to ever do it, honestly, by 2015, you were named a Master of the Sport by U.S. Gymnastics, which is the highest individual honor in the sport. Pretty special. Not something you set out for, but you built that. You earned that. And that's part of your legacy. What did that mean for you? And you can wrap up with this response. What does your place in Sachem coaching and Sachem educational history, sort of with this Master of Sport, what does that all mean for you and what you left in this community?
Well, it was a great honor, but it was the greatest honor was to coach those kids, and it was them that got me the recognition. It was the Chris Lamorts, the all the other great gymnasts that I coached in a 20-year period. I think we had 13 ring titles in the state meet. And Sachem was a great place to work. And again, there were 2 things that made me a much better coach. First of all, Fred. Second of all, becoming a judge and learning, really learning how to put together a routine. And the work ethic of all the coaches at Sachem. I at one time had been an assistant track coach. I ended up giving that up because I saw my head coaching job as a gymnastics coach as a year-round thing, that I couldn't afford to spend the time coaching field events and track. At that time would be better spent in the weight room in the off season, or taking kids to different places to work out. And Sachem was a different place to be. It was wonderful, and I miss it. And I don't know if there'll ever be that time period from when we grew. I don't know if it'll ever be repeated again. I was very fortunate.
It will never be repeated again. There's no. I mean, it's impossible to go from nothing to something amazing, unless history repeats itself and enrollment dips enough where they have to reinvent itself in a singular way. But, we'll see organically if society and living standards and cost of living affect that.
Right.
It's going to be interesting, honestly. And it's still young. If you look at some of the school districts that have been around for 100+ years, we're not even, we're at half of that. We're still figuring ourselves out as a community and the school system. And, I just want to make sure we don't forget where we came from so we know where we're going to go from here and embrace who we were and who we are today. And you're a piece of that. You helped create that history. I appreciate everything you've done on behalf of our alumni, the thousands of people you've impacted on a sport that means so much to you and so many other people. So I appreciate this conversation, and you spending some time with me today.
Thank you for everything, Chris. You've done it all. You're a great example of what Sachem is, and we all appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks very much, and until the next conversation.